All right, everyone, I think we're going to get started for today. So this afternoon, we are pleased to welcome Dr. David Bailey, who is the president and CEO of Genome Alberta. Dr. Bailey earned his PhD in genetics and animal breeding from the University of Alberta in 1985, and he began his career as a research scientist with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, later moving into leadership roles, including Director General. A recipient of multiple research and innovation awards, Dr. Bailey has published over 60 peer-reviewed papers and served on numerous advisory boards. And since 2006, he has led Genome Alberta as president and CEO, fostering partnerships to advance genomics in key Alberta sectors. He has also held adjunct appointments at Texas A&M and the University of Calgary. And today he is going to be presenting his talk on leading graduate studies and what's next.
Thank you. Well, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. And it's been a fun day already, meeting a bunch of people. And so I would really like to keep this informal, and I'm going to ask you some questions. But the intent was, Christine said, years ago, she said, I really like what you do. How did you get from being, a student in animal breeding to president of this company? And I said, well, that was along the line of the road. And she said, but it's different than what I'm doing. And so could you come and explain to students, what are the opportunities? It's not so just deviate a little bit. When I was a grad student, I was still focused on the research. I wasn't thinking about a job, that was 3 and 4 or 5 years away. And yet some of my colleagues knew from day one that they were going to be doing this step in a master's and a PhD, and they had a job lined up and they knew exactly what to do. I wasn't one of those. I didn't have some preconceived notion where I was going to be. Thought it might be an academic position, and then other opportunities came up. So that's really what I want to talk to you about. There are many opportunities. So what does this degree in particularly animal breeding, why is that really important? What are the opportunities? And maybe talk about opportunities you haven't thought of. And therefore, you need to develop skill sets to get that job. And so we're going to talk through that, but I really want to ask you then some questions of, well, that's what the purpose of this is, get you engaged and say, first question for you to be thinking about is, why are you here? It might be a very simple question, but from here, where does that lead you? Obviously, it needs to have purpose. So be thinking about that, because I welcome your input, and maybe that can help with the discussion. So keep it informal, and welcome to the folks online as well. So really, I'm going to talk about myself a little bit, and I made a few notes that I need to refer to, so I stick to being on time. So as I already talked about, so I have a PhD in genetics and animal breeding, but not from the University of Guelph, from the University of Alberta. And so just talk about, I'm actually from Quebec. I'm not from Alberta. I'm in Eastern Townships, Quebec, and my first degree is in biology from Bishop University, very small English language university in Quebec, although it's 70% bilingual classes now in the science program. So what else? So how was that experience? So when I was doing my 4th year in biology, I was in the honors program, so that meant you had to take a special course, and that you had to do something in research. And luckily for me, Agriculture Canada had a research center in Atlantic under the umbrella called Sherbrooke, and some of you know about it. It's got a big dairy program. Anyway, so I was allowed to go there, and I was working on data. And it was sheep data, so I didn't know anything about sheep. I know about beef cattle, and I know about horses, but I don't know about sheep. Anyway, it was an opportunity on a crossbred program in sheep breeding, and so they gave me the data, and I actually wrote a paper and published it as an undergraduate. And that year, the Canadian Society of Animal Science was meeting at Guelph, so my first experience in Guelph was long time ago as an undergraduate. And so that really helped me focus on, I really like research. So then I decided to go to grad school and was either doing in medicine or in agriculture, and I chose agriculture. And I chose University of Alberta because I'd never been to Alberta, and Roy was my supervisor, and many people here would know of him. And he was a controversial, tough guy to be under. And back then, we didn't have cell phones, and he went away on sabbatical for a year and he went to Australia. So I mean, we weren't communicating for a whole year. But anyway, opportunity came up, so I went there to study and work on beef cattle. And after finishing the courses, you're looking what to do in beef cattle, and they had a big ranch at Kinsella and had multiple crossbred herds, and they had a double muscle herd of cattle as well. But then an opportunity came up. Agriculture Canada offered a large selection project for some graduate students. So he showed me what the data was and asked me if I'd like them. It was on mice. I didn't go all that way there, I thought, to work on mice, but that's what I ended up doing. And it was looking at the effects of selection, long-term selection, on carcass composition, which then had a very direct, so I did that and I wrote my PhD on that, but it actually had a huge application to what I did in my career, because just before I graduated, I was lucky enough to get a job working for agriculture and agri-food out of Lethbridge, and I became the beef cattle geneticist for them, which I can tell you was a dream job. An 800 cattle herd, ranch location with help, long-term selection project. So I actually loved that. So anyway, I did that for 10 years, but I want to put a question out to you now. So during that interview for that job, first, you're not a graduate student, and you're focused on this and you try to get ready for it. One of the questions was, where will you, for this job in Canada, where will you be in 10 years? And I thought, well, if I got this job, this is what I want to do. And 10 years to the day almost, I left that job. So, I didn't know that. I didn't know. I did have a fun, fantastic job there, but I did change. And that's what I want to talk about today to you folks, because I think none of us have a job that's 25, 35 years in this one. Even if you hired it on at university, you're going to change probably in time and move through that university system. So you won't be doing what you thought you were doing when you hired on often. Or things change and you don't want to be there, or you don't find the funding. Funding's better somewhere else, or you decide that there's something more important for me to do. So we're going to talk through a bunch of that. I don't want to talk too much about me, but Christine said I really had to give you the background here so that we could have this conversation. So this is the format for today, and so you have that background on me. So this is what I did. Yeah, so another opportunity. So talk about opportunities. So I left Lethbridge and moved to Ottawa, and I was program director for Western Canada, and that was then I became the director of the research center in Charlottetown, which was actually a lovely job to have and a great environment. And then in Macomb at the more beef related job. But during that time in 2003, BSE hit Canada, and that was that really affected me directly. And not that I own cattle or anything, but the department, the deputy minister came to me directly, bypassed my boss, and he said, listen, you have a PhD in genetics. We don't know anything about this prion topic, but you're our person. And like out of the blue, like it just showed up. And he was a difficult deputy, by the way, not an easy guy to work with. You don't say no to him unless you are career limiting opportunity. So what that meant is that, here you're trained in animal breeding and talking about a prion disease that I really didn't know anything about. That changed a lot of my career path, actually, that involvement. So I had to be the department representative. We and another fellow named Neil Cashman, who we co-wrote together a National Center of Excellence proposal, and we got it called PreNet Canada, funding for 7 years of that. And And I've become really involved with this whole topic of because it was so difficult from a genetic point of view. Prions are really, really difficult things to understand how they're replicated, how they're inherited. And then there's different forms like BSC, the mad cow disease, cattle, the chronic wasting disease is a major problem still today in North America, principally in Western Canada and Western US, but in other countries, in red deer and animals in other countries. And then there's other variations of this, the human form, CJD or variant CJD, big problem. And I had a personal friend died of that. I couldn't understand the topic. How could he, just a few years ago, inherit this disease, or how did he was contact? How did he eat contaminated meat? Turns out there's a small percentage of people that who have genetic susceptibility to. And then I did some background on his family. He lives in Calgary, but he was from Ontario. And it turns out his uncle died from that. So his uncle died from it, and his grandfather died from it, and his grandmother died from it. So there's something going on here, and that was, he hadn't had any more information to this whole time. So so you're a guy in genetics, so you have to move through the system. And I get appointed as the Director General of Food Safety, which, yeah, we're interested in food safety, food recalls and all that topic. And I had people across Canada reporting to me. I love that position too. So then, how does somebody in animal breeding get into this? Because I really enjoyed the whole topic of food safety and pretty much the microbiology behind that. And then out of the blue, I got headhunted for this position as Genome Alberta. And when I was called, that search firm said, "Have you ever heard of Genome Alberta?" I said, "No, I've never heard of them." And it's true. I knew about Genome Canada. I'd been part of the very first meeting for Genome Canada was proposed back in 1998, 1999. So I received the go ahead. I won the competition and started in 2006 and as president and CEO. And I do love what we're doing now. But it really was a stretch position because it wasn't, Genome Alberta is not about agriculture. It's about agriculture, agri-food. It's about human health. It's about forestry. It's about environmental, even about energy. And you think, what's the involvement in energy? There's a lot of biological processes in energy that we aren't even capturing today. And we're promoting that as an area to go forward. So that's kind of a very different pathway, So that's where we got to so far. And with me, I'm the longest serving CEO in this Genome Canada enterprise. There's 6 genome centers across Canada, Ontario Genomics based in Toronto, and then there's 5 others, and then there's Genome Canada in Ottawa. And all of Genome Canada's money has to flow through one of the regional genome centers. So that's the federal provincial model. And the advantage of that is that it allows us at the regional level or provincial level to advise Genome Canada what should be the national strategy in human health or in agriculture or in environment. And it's a very, very good federal provincial model. And I feel it's got representation and it's, I'd say, a very healthy attitude by Genome Canada to incorporate what is important to you. One of the interesting things is that when I took this job on, Genome Canada was at 6 years old, and so were the other genome centers. Genome Alberta was the last one being created. We were part of Genome Prairie before that. And Genome Canada didn't have energy as a theme, an eligible area for funding. And for those that know, most of Alberta's funding is generated through oil and gas revenues, royalties coming in from that. And so what I proposed to the board of Genome Canada is that energy should be part of what is eligible for consideration. And eventually they did agree to that. And we ended up putting together a very large project where we looked at extraction of hydrocarbons from the soil, from the ground. But it equally had to have an equal amount of money and time spent on bioremediation. And that was a really big project. It was one of the largest, $13 million. And, I had never met the people in oil and gas before. I mean, just not who I meet with. So I set up appointments with different oil and gas companies and said, I'd like to come and see you. And they were polite, said, and then you get there and they said, well, here's our geology engineer, and what do you want to talk about? And I said, well, biological perspective. And it's, we don't hire you people, like, thank you for coming. And I said, well, my interest was, would you like to be better efficient at extracting the bitumen from the ground? Well, he says, how would you do that? Well, I said, what breaks bitumen down? Bacteria. Yeah. So I said, what happens? We made a 1% improvement in the efficiency of extraction. They said, well, and I used $70 a barrel as an oil for oil at the time. It varies quite a bit. It's less than that today, but it can be double that almost as well. So they said, we'd be very interested. So we ended up putting together a large project, which these multinationals came to the table and helped fund that initiative. So it's an example again, how do you sell yourself and take the tools that you have been learning here all your way through your career and putting that into perspective. So I'd like to stop for a minute and just ask around the room for people just to say, why are you here? And what do you want to get out of today? Of today being your day and your time here at the University of Guelph. So just please informally just talk to me about that and see where you're going. And because it helped me frame part of the next part of the conversation. What are the soft skills that you might need? I mean, you really you have the hard skills and the courses and that, and understanding of science and structure and hypothesis and putting end goals, but will that get you a job at the end of the day? So, boss, please.
Not everybody all at once can. We talked already that I have a job like that. But once I get through that role and I decide there might be somewhere else I kind of want to understand what the skills I would need to transition into a new role of maybe leadership or management. And kind of how to navigate that in case it's something I want to do once I'm in that role.
Right. Okay, good. Okay. Others.
I'm gonna pick on you if you don't answer.
No pressure though.
I think you have a really interesting perspective as someone who's done a lot of different jobs and like what drives you to switch between jobs. Does it have to be something that's really interesting that drives you to make that decision, or is it just what comes up and how do you make that decision?
Yeah, that's this lot of personal answers to that. It's not all professional, and there's why I go in the latter time. There's other personal family issues that come into play. I'll just deviate from answering you directly, and just one other thought I had. So when I was roughly at your stage, particularly at the master's level, you're asked to talk a lot and start going to conferences, and I didn't like that in high school. I was shy, still quite shy, but anyway, I didn't want to get up. So when I got to the first job as a research scientist in Lethbridge, I joined Toastmasters. And you go to Toastmasters, and as it was a breakfast meeting, and it was good for me. I mean, because it forced me, like, you're on, like, and so the example would be, and it was a really good one I've ever thought. They say, Globe and Mail, see that article on front page today? Well, I hadn't even read the Globe and Mail that morning, and said, what are your thoughts on that? So not only you don't know the topic area, you haven't even thought about what your perspective on this should be. And so it learned to, so every breakfast would be like that. You like somebody would say, I get into an accident, had a car accident, anybody experienced with this insurance company, they're real tough people to deal with. And so, but you're expected, it might be just a fake example, but you're expected to talk to them about that, be able to think on your feet or deviate. Like, you have to buy yourself some time. I need to give a logical answer here, especially if I'm in an interview and I don't really know where this question came from. But okay, so how do you buy yourself some time? And so you try to engage the person, say, that's a great idea. I haven't thought through that clearly, but would you go, and you kind of bounce it back to them a little bit, and then you get a conversation going as all the pressure's not just on you. So. Right. So that is example of a soft skill, being able to think on your feet outside the box and be prepared. How do you be prepared? When you go to the interviews, I mean, they might have a standard bunch of questions, but during the interview, something else comes up and triggers on somebody and says, oh, I hadn't thought about that. And they ask you questions that are not part of the regular thing. And it throws you, and you need to impress people that you can handle thinking. And a lot of it is you be asked to speak at public events too. And so early on in this role, actually, here I was asked to come to a meeting of families who had a child with a common particular genetic disease. So Francois Bernier, the rare disease specialist at the University of Calgary, he and I would go together. So how would we handle these kind of things? And so now you're talking to people that are emotionally very, very involved with something. And, these are not diseases that I work with, but how do you say, the solution for this is we're working through this particular project. Hopefully you pinpoint the direction you go, and here's a potential cure for it. But then gene editing comes up, and back, 15 years ago, this topic was cloning. What do you think about cloning? And in the public's eyes, they have very little, and for the most part, very little experience in science. So, we have to talk through the advantages, but you also be aware that somebody in the room is going to say, there's the disadvantages here, and you acknowledge it. So, to your point, one of the things I feel is really important skill set is listening to people. Like, I have a very diverse work group, and different countries, and that we're not very big, 14, 15 people, but they all have a voice, and they come from different backgrounds. And I think we benefit from that. And other people say, I don't know, just focus on this and make the decision. No, that's not as good a decision usually as you can benefit collective effort. Okay. And they hear your perspective, and there are things that you might know that they don't know, and priorities that the government are different than what we're thinking. How do we, if you're not part of their priorities, you're not going to get funded. My number one day job is raising money. So how do we raise money to fund projects? How do you convince people that science is the best investment? And I don't know in Ontario, but in Alberta, most of the bureaucrats that I'm working with are not science people. They're economists, lawyers, but they're not science people. So you've got to start square one and say, is this important to you? It's usually important to them if they have a problem in their own family. Everybody has somebody has had a heart attack or cancer or something. So that's how you can, hey, well, what are we doing on cancer? When I first started in Alberta, none of the provinces were doing, you couldn't do DNA sequencing for anybody back then. It was not an option, but the Mayo Clinic was doing it in the US. So I said, why aren't we doing that in Alberta? And they said, for particular cancer, I went to the Alberta Cancer Board and talked to the guy's president, said, that's a great idea. Your job now is to convince the researchers, the academics, that we should be doing sequencing on individual patients. So there was two major cancer research centers, one at the University of Alberta, University of Calgary Cross, and Tom Baker. And so, here's an animal geneticist going into a room with, very serious cancer specialists. And we talked through, why would we not be bringing that test candidate or to Alberta? And we did. But the economics, again, became an economic decision. I said, if you want to look at one example, look at breast cancer. What are the three options there, right? Surgery, chemo, radiation. And I said, what's the cost of that per person? And so okay. I said, 40% of those women are not going to respond to that routine treatment. 40%. But they are going to continue to feel the effects of the disease and no progress. So we convinced them that it was worthwhile bringing in that test, and the rest of the country has followed suit too. So that's an example of having influence, been able to push something that benefit to society. So, we're running out of time. I've got to speed up. So what does what you're doing today lead you towards your career path? So that's really, you know, that's a question. So I welcome your input, and others that have already gone through it can chime in. So, Michael, you had a very path, being from what you did originally here to what you were doing in the States, come back here. I mean, that's an example of probably as a grad student, you were planning all of that.
I know. I totally agree with you about being open to new ideas to where you might go. And I always tell people that serendipity is your friend, because sometimes you may have an idea in mind of where you want your career to go, but you can't predict what opportunities are going to come up. Like, so you just have to be prepared to say yes to something that is not what you planned. And another good piece of advice that a manager of mine once gave is, not every job has to be your dream job. So you can think of some of your jobs as a stepping stone towards your ideal career path, but don't fixate too much on a specific job, because you'll always be unhappy. You'll never get the exact job that you want.
People, how do you feel that this degree or these degrees are helping you towards a specific endpoint like this? You're not taking it just because it's fun. You hope there's an endpoint that has a dollar sign behind it. I mean, we all need to live, and as it gets further on, I get have a partner, and all of a sudden the partner is not part of your science program, and they're working, and you're a poorly paid student. How many of you are on stipends or TAs? Most of the group. So you are professionals of that. So, and what does it mean to act like that? Professional societies, you represent this area. That means so. But I just, this career path leads me to that question of where you want to be in 5 to 10 years, and it's a really good one to think through. Where does that career lead you? What stepping stones need? So the next part is really, where are those opportunities? And so many of people, when we go into grad school, think, well, the job at the end of this is likely a university professorship, hopefully a teaching research combination. Less than 25% of graduate students go into teaching. So that's reality, and that number is probably decreasing. Universities in Canada are not in a good financial situation right across the country. This province included, for sure. And all of you have had professors that shouldn't be teaching. So it's not a job for everybody. So hopefully, but what else is out there, if that's not an option for you? And I said government, and I move through government, and I'd say that's one of the things I'd say government has to offer. You may get a job in one department, but once you're inside, you are eligible for transfers to other jobs or other locations that the outside doesn't get an opportunity for. And that mobility can be really important, as if you have a partner and person working in another city or province, then you can get a transfer there within government fairly easily, particularly more recently, being able to work more from home, that type of thing. Industry hires a lot. Yeah.
I was going to ask you, David, and you don't have to answer this right now, but you're very effective at what you do. And I'm sure a lot of the skills that you use every day are not what you learned when you were in grad school. That's correct. And I would say one of your strengths is some of your soft skills. Could you say a little bit about the importance of soft skills in what you do and through your career?
Yeah.
So you go carry on with your train of thought. But
Well, I raise money, right? So where do you raise money? From government, from industry partners? How do you sell yourself to them? What do you have that versus doing? So I'd say one of the things is for government, it's government relation skills. And again, you have to meet with ministers, and they have their own agenda. And if you don't think that government is involved with research, or even research at universities, you need to rethink it. Where does the money come from? Most of the money comes to universities. Most of the money is from government, provincial, federal dollars. And so how do you get into that? And so one thing that I found really lacking inside the federal government is that, in order to get a program funded, it had to be through an approved policy. So you go and talk to people in policy. They didn't have a science background. So they're approving stuff or not approving stuff that I didn't feel they had a lot of strength in. So an opportunity is to get into the policy people so that you can influence the direction of the research, the funding that's made available. Because governments need to be accountable for that funding, and so they ask policy people to give them the recommendations. Well, there's not a lot of communication between the research and policy people. It doesn't go well. So that's another skill set. Government relations is a big deal. Government communications. So on our board, we have a science communicator, very famous person that's known in Canada, written many books, but his number one question for me or anyone he's talking, he says, the biggest thing you can do is know your audience. You're going to be talking to the public. It's a different pitch. You're talking to a group of your peers in animal breeding. So, again, it's a skill set to have to know your audiences. And it's really important to talking to high school students or parents, that's it. Don't talk over them. Our jargon is something we're familiar with. It's foreign to so many other people. So try to make sure that they can understand where are you going. I had a board member and she became the chair and we didn't get along in the beginning. So, but we ended up at a good place. But anyway, her question was always, you're asking, the board to approve this investment here and you want to spend it on, her question was always the same, 2 words. So what? So what if you have that we give you the approval, what is that going to do for society, for that sector? So you have to thought through it, Michael, to your point is, where's the benefit? Where's the return on investment? I have to answer that question a lot. And what we do in science, it's a long-term investment in most cases. And now I've had a project with agriculture funding in Alberta, and they said projects have to be 1 year in duration. Can you do it 1 year? Well, you don't start from scratch and get very much done in a year, analyze, publish, and have an impact. So we had to look for what projects were already underway, but needed some additional funding to get that accomplished in 1 year. So producers, we all need to work with. They say, what can you do? Why would I have public money going into what you're doing? And you have to be able to convince, this is the short term, this is the long term. And farmers are in it for the long term, but they all want to see a return. Consultants, a lot of consultants. We use consultants in every sector, because how do we keep up with the technology we work with? You people, but then you are applying for stuff. We need external reviewers, so we have to hire those people to keep it fair. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. Federal government and provincial governments are good ones. They're really good ones I've found. Industry-focused jobs are usually very focused. You come in, you know what you're going to be doing, but there's opportunities, especially if they have a research and development division or an innovation sphere. And then an example we're not for profit, and I report to an independent board, as do my colleagues at the other genome centers. They're all in different boards. We have board members I have some board members from outside the province. Some live here in Ontario. But there are some of the commodity groups that are really interesting jobs, So Filippo working for Lapton, as an example, he gets to use his skills every day. But there are other funding bodies. So one of the organizations we get a lot of our agriculture funding through is an agency of Alberta Agriculture. So they have the research component there, and they have quite a bit of money to spend per year. So that's called RDAR, Results Driven Agriculture. Their whole board is producers. Could be grain, could be soil health, could be livestock. So, they are looking for short-term responses, but you also have to convince them that they want, yeah, here's the technology for tomorrow, but you need to be competing and thinking about 5 and 10 years out. So here's what we need to be investing. So convince them that that's a smart, and where do you work with? Not all the skills. That's why we are working with Filippo and Angela and Flavio and Christina, is that they have skill sets that we don't have. Why would we generate all that investment and time to creating that in Alberta if we can have it here and it's common problems we're working towards? So that's my, I'm very big on looking at where's the best people to work on a project here. So it's that common, and back to your point, Michael, it's the ability to work together. We tend to be individuals working in almost isolation, and it's a team effort. And you, if 9 out of 10 projects have to be are won by teams, not by individuals. So that's again, and it's not that easy. I won't go into details, but one of the reasons I left a job that I loved is my boss was a real dick to work for, and I couldn't get around him. Like he just was super jealous individual, and I couldn't so I said I'm not gonna win here, and I moved on. I eventually became his boss, so life was a lot better. Anyway, I think that's about it for me. Happy to have a discussion or questions or comments on that. Filippo has a different background as well. We go back a long ways, and both worked at Canada at one time and changed for different reasons. So, happy to have input from any thoughts, comments, questions.
You want to ask your question or make your comment?
Yeah, I think I want to first let the audience know that if we are where we are with this large team and so on, is because back in 2013, me and Jacques Chenet, we had this project on which we became the Fish and the Genome project. We knocked the door to Ontario Genomics, and Ontario Genomics snapped us. And then we talked to David and Heiss, which is the CSO, and say, absolutely, come to us. And the rest is history. I mean, it's David, that was the sliding door, I think, for all of us to create the opportunity to have this large project that then, became the Resilient Genome Project, now the Net Zero Genome Project, even we went with Ontario Genomics with the last one, but really allow us to establish ourselves as a great match for Genome Canada funding for large scale projects. So I just want to everybody know that your warm hospitality and acceptance of our needs was fantastic, and it's really appreciated.
Thanks, Filippo. That wasn't a plug. It was meant to be a plug.
So, I like to comment on my own experience and see your opinion. When I was here, I moved to Canada. I was research assistant, associate at that time. And then this, suddenly there was a position for a professor position. And then it was in Derrick. And before all my years of university and research was beef cattle, sheep. And then when I look at the description, I said, this is Derrick. Oh, I don't have any chance. Then the day before the deadline, I was working late and walking the halls here. And then I met Jim Wilton, that was the director of CGIL. And Jim Wilton said to me, Flav, did you apply for the position? And I said, no, I'm not going to apply because I think I don't have any chance. And he said, no, you should apply. I think you are going to be a good candidate. And then he said, but I said, no, but I don't have any experience. I never did any work on Derrick. And he said to me, Flavio, this piece will be the fourth or fifth criteria in our selection. There are many other things that are going to look after to look at the species. And that was a revelation for me. I said, wow, they're more than they're being exact. And so I applied and I got the position. So there's many other, now I know by experience, right? Participating in selection committees, I know that there are many other skills that you have to look before to really see that very detailed species that you work with, right? There's things like the overall soundness of your background in terms of science, right? There is relationships,
Yes.
how you deal with people, how you are a kind of a team player, all these several items that come much, in this criteria before than the species. So do you have any comments for the young people here on what is the main criteria to select one candidate? Of course, depending on the position, but I listed already. I think the overall background is, if it's scientific position, the science and methods and so on, because those you can apply for any species, any situation. And I almost didn't apply. If I was not lucky to meet the director of CGIL, I would not apply. I would not be a candidate for the position because I had the wrong vision that you have to be a perfect fit, including the species. and it was not.
I say that, yeah, to be open, be aware of what other things, look at it carefully and say, maybe I can add value, especially if you aren't finding a job, easily. I had a similar experience that when I was in Lethbridge and I wasn't, I didn't know where after 10 years what I was going to do. And there was a job in Ottawa. And so I got to go and act in it, which helped a lot. So you kind of got a feel for it. And then I applied for it. And I thought, there's no chance. I know 2 other people that are applying for it. They live in Ottawa. They know the job better than I. They're going to get it. And then I got it. And I asked my boss, I didn't know why I got the job. I had to go to the interview, you studied, you got it, but they would know the job better than I. He said you had much more enthusiasm for the job than they did. They kind of took it for granted they were going to get it. And so, that's hard to put in a value on enthusiasm, but if you really go after something, put your whole heart into it and you said, know the job, know people, know who you're going to be working with and get to know their style. I was very lucky. I had a great person I worked for in Ottawa. He was a terrific role model, and that helped a lot. And just find out about the job, ask questions. Is it something you really want to do? Or this job was brand new, so I didn't have anybody to ask, and it was I felt lucky to get the job. And why am I still here? And now I've been on the selection board for Genome Canada's CEO. They've had 4. I've been on the selection board for 2 of them. So, so I had a big influence of who that was going to be. And I was the only non-board member on that selection committee. So, so you're sitting around rooms. So I said to the committee, because they're all board members and I'm not. And I said, what's my role here? He said, well, the search firm that was hired said you bring the perspective from the job. I said, do I have an equal vote? They said, yes. They had to kind of decide if I did. They did. And in the end, that was a very good question to ask because the chair wanted somebody else in the end. And the rest of us didn't. So I didn't know how this was going to go. Select for the next CEO for Genome Canada. As a chair, what authority am I going to have over him? So I said to the search firm guy, this is not going to go well. We're going to get somebody that I don't think should be the first choice. And the search firm said, well, I said, because the chair of the board is going to block it. He said, no, you know what we're going to do? We're going to ask everybody else for their input first. And then he's going to realize that he's all alone. And that's what happened. And we got, I think, the best person. So it's ask questions. When you're in that situation, with uncomfortable situation.
So that leads to my questions, David. I wanted Mike and maybe Christine, if you can have your 2 cents in as well. Because you just mentioned the uncomfortableness of going through questions, and I was wondering about the discomfort of going to a position where you don't have much experience. So for example, we're trained here to do genetic analysis, for example, but there are many industries or companies out there where you're not going to be doing exactly that. But you have a set of skills that the company might need, but you just don't feel like, hey, this is for me, as Flavio was saying, for the academic position, but that happens a lot in the industry. So what are your thoughts on just going for a position that may not be as comfortable for you, but may lead you to a lot of growth?
It's a good question because often you are in that situation and, or you don't know where the company may be going to. Here's where they are today, but they're pivoting to, so you need to really know their strategy and see how can I contribute to that strategy? And you might be able to even say, have you considered, because you've done your homework, have you considered taking this angle on it? And that will really impress them because you're going to catch them off guard. Oh, probably haven't really thought that well through that. We think here's the goal, but you might come in from a different perspective or bring a broader perspective to it. So not everything has to be invented new. Apply some other technologies here to get to where we want to go, get there faster. It's not bad to feel uncomfortable, puts you on the spot. How do you help the company get there? If you're helping them, they want you to be part of it. But Christine, you've gone through lots of this too.
It's a great question. And I think there's probably many answers depending on who you are. Some people are really self-confident, right? Or they might look really self-confident, but inside they're questioning themselves constantly. And other people are not self-confident, but they have a quiet confidence, and they know intrinsically that they can do the job. But sometimes it's easier to go with the person who seems like they're really confident, right? They know exactly what they're going to do. And I think it's more reassuring to talk to the person who exudes confidence. And that's really difficult to do, right? Because it takes energy all the time. When I became chair of the department, I had never been chair before. When I took up the acting associate dean of external relations, I had never done that before. And I have no idea what the next challenge is going to be on a day-to-day basis. But I think ultimately you need to show up. You need to, if you're committed to something, it doesn't maybe even matter if you have the skills that you think you need, because someone believes in you. Someone has said, you know what, Lucas, I think you can do this, and I trust you to bring your entire self to work today. And no matter what challenge is going to come, I trust you to be able to figure it out. And I think that is huge. If you're willing to do that, you're going to be totally okay. Even if, regardless of whether or not you're a person who's super self-confident, or you look really self-confident, or you're a shy and maybe reserved person, right? I mean, those are very different things. I think you can help yourself in that when people start to get to know you, they realize, oh yeah, I think I can lean on Lucas, or I know I can lean on Ricardo, or I know I can talk to David about this because I know he or she is gonna show up and do their best. And everybody's gonna make a mistake. I mean, if you're paralyzed by the idea of making the wrong decision, it's gonna be tough. You're gonna have a tough life. Because everyone questions. You should question yourself. You should weigh things very carefully, right? There's a saying in German, where you cut wood, that's where the sawdust falls. Right? If you're not going to make a decision, if you're not going to do something, you'll never make a mess, but you're never going to feel what it's like to have real success. real success. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's my thoughts.
I was gonna say, every position I've ever taken, I've had doubts. Where you don't feel 100% certain that you can do the job as well as anybody else, right? I'd almost go so far as to say that if you have no doubts, you're probably not gonna grow in that role, right? So you need to challenge yourself. Right from the very first job I took, which, well, you mentioned public speaking. I was very shy. And public speaking was like the last thing on earth I wanted to do. But I found myself having to talk to farmer groups. And we did these farmer meetings, and, you know, I was talking to people that knew way more about reading and pedigrees. And I'm trying to talk to them about, you know, stuff that I didn't feel I knew as much about. But if, you know, you do your homework, and there's a little bit of fake it till you make it, so that kind of thing, right? So, but I would say there's a balance there, because obviously you can't apply for something that you have no qualifications for, right? But if you think that there's something you can add to the job and maybe interpret the job in your way, like what can I bring to it that maybe it's not in the job description, something special that I have, you can bring that out, and maybe that's something that they might want.
There's one more. I was on an airplane recently and I watched a movie, and it may seem like a religious movie. It's not. I know that there's many denominations represented here, but the movie is called Conclave. Has anyone heard of it? Has anyone seen it? It's really interesting, okay? It's the decision of how to choose the next pope. It is fascinating, and it deals with exactly this topic, right? How do you know? I mean, the next pope, you can be whatever religion you want to be, but the pope in the Christian world is a pretty important position, and it is incredible to see, to have a little bit of insight as to how that is. And it's just, if you can bear with it, watch it, because it's really interesting. There's very different ways of becoming a leader, and how a group chooses really who the next leader is going to be. And it has to do with self-doubt, and it has to do with all of these things. It's a good watch. It's a good watch.
I think it's important you say, you know, you're afraid to ask the question. I think even if you ask the question, then the reception, they already know the answer, something to the interviewer, to the board, whoever you speak to. It shows that you thought about it, and then it opens the dialogue. You know, we've done that, and then you move into a discussion, and you see where they really want to go and how you could be part of that. The one thing that you all have experience with is working on data sets, and data is, you know, it's crucial to everything we do now. So analyzing data, I mean, companies, so we meet with a lot of companies, and we're trying to promote general technologies. And often we meet with companies, we say, you've got this huge database, and we'd like to put somebody in there and help analyze that. They said, well, we never thought, where do you find it? You know, to have the skill sets, you know, I mean, don't even know where to look, you know, because they didn't realize they've got more value in that data than they're actually mining rate. So data, you have a lot of skill sets for what the public is going to need going forward, and it's at all levels. Even at the political, they don't know very much about science. That's one of the problems we have in Canada, is that most politicians have zero skills in science. And so how do you get them to invest? How do you get the Minister of Agriculture or Health to invest in science or research? It's a challenge. That's a real challenge. And therefore you have to find a commonality where they will have genetic problem or something. Mental health issues. I mean, that's a major topic. Here, we, the GM Alberta, are working on mental health issues. You know, you say, what's your angle on that? Well, 75% of genetic diseases, mental health diseases, are genetic. So we can get in at an earlier stage, then we can make a lot more progress. So I never even envisioned that 19 years ago when I started this one, that we would be involved with that. That wasn't something people, that's what psychologists do. You know, it's a whole team effort from a genetic perspective. But we haven't heard from Angela, so Angela,
Try to be quiet. Okay. So, oh my gosh, yeah. So it's my experience also is a mix of what Mike mentioned, Flavio, Christine. So it's very interesting because regarding my position here, it was similar to Flavio. So I did my PhD in pigs. And then I was working in Davis in California, mostly in dairy cattle. So my position was beef cattle and small ruminants. I was like, okay, I'm not gonna apply. But yeah, I decided also, last moment to apply. And here I am. So, and also it's regarding what Mike mentioned, no? Be open, be your mind open. Don't say no, opportunities will come. So you need to be open and think about that, no? In my case, it was hard decision because my idea was, okay, I'm gonna finish my PhD, my postdoc, all my years in US, in Europe, but then I'm gonna back to Spain. And that, when I decided to apply to Canada, it was not on my plans, to move to Canada and having my life here. My son is Canadian, now I'm Canadian. So, but I was open, to that. And then I put in a balance, the things, and I make that decision. But if I was my mind closed and don't think about really the opportunities that life or destiny or, give to you, I was not here. And also regarding to be out of the comfort zone, also what Lucas mentioned. So I remember when I started here, you need to deal with a lot of things, right? So you need to create your research program independently. You need to build your lab, your team. You need to start teaching sometimes topics that you never teach. You need to prepare everything from zero. And on top of this, I had to meet all the beef producers in Canada. How is the beef cattle production in Canada? That again, I didn't have a lot of experience in beef cattle. So I remember the first year I was traveling a lot to Alberta, to all the places in Canada to meet producers, to meet the stakeholders of the industry, to meet the people that they could help me on that. And it was hard and it was challenging. And I had to be out of my comfort zone constantly for, I don't know for how long, but a lot, talking with producers. Also, sometimes is another field, another sector, the way also, that you talk to them. Also, they expect maybe, another type of person. And they were seeing this girl, from Spain with this Spanish accent, young. Maybe it's not what they expected, but with work, very hard work, and be out of the comfort zone. Don't be afraid. I was scared, but it's like, I'm gonna do it. Better or worse, as Christine mentioned, we don't do everything perfect, but the important thing is that you want to do it, and you learn by doing it and by mistakes. So then you realize after some time that you have this respect from the industry, from the producers, then they trust you. But if you don't do this hard work, even that it's gonna be very hard and you are out of the comfort zone, that's not gonna happen, So, and you are in a stage that you need to work hard. I'm not saying that it's mandatory to work like Christina and me, you remember the past years, 24 hours, non-stop, being here, writing proposals at 4 a.m., not joking. But at your stage, I worked so hard. And I think I'm here because I worked so hard. So you need to work hard. It's not like this, like we want you to work, 24 hours, but you need to take all the opportunities that life presents you, or to be here in this amazing group that we are top in the world because we all work very hard. So you need to take these opportunities. And I was taking all the opportunities that will happen in all my career. And if I was not taking all of them, I was not here today. And of course, that comes with no sleep, no, sometimes, of course, I wanted to be, more relaxed and, but you need to take it. Now you are young, you have the energy, not like me anymore. But yeah.
Is there any questions from people online?
No, nothing has come up yet. Do you have any other questions from? You're talking about opportunities and I'm a little bit interested on time management.
Yeah.
How we deal with these opportunities and how we focus on it.
Time management.
Yeah.
This is probably not the right group.
No.
The hours that I know individual in this room put in, they're not 40-hour weeks. My job not a 40-hour week, so I mean, I doubt yours is, I know Christine's is not, because I work with her closely and, that's a good question, because, you know, that needs to be an important thing for the family, your partner or family to juggle, like, you know, how do you get it all done? That's, I think you do the best you can, and if not enough, you have to speak up and say, you know, I am doing it, you know, I need extra help, that type of thing. I don't know, other perspectives on it, I mean, there's a balance, right? Otherwise you get burned out, right? And that's not what anybody wants.
Yeah, one word, prioritization. Pick the most important thing and do it right, you know. It's better to do the things that are most important and do it well. The other stuff, you know, falls off the table and it doesn't matter as much, or somebody else will do it, right? But what is the main thing you want to do it well?
Now, it's related to the different subject, because I read some articles more recently that they show clearly, statistically, that if you change jobs more often, you're going to do better financially. That you commit with one university, one university. But then they are comment that, okay, financially you do better. And a lot of young people are applying this nowadays, right? They don't commit with their jobs. It's 2-3 years on another job because they can get at the end salary that would be better. But then there is the quality of life and how you balance family, you know, other things. Because when you change jobs very often, you're going to make more money, but you have all the stress of starting again. And of course, you have a family has to move with you if it's another place. But if you establish your career in one single or few jobs, then in this sense, the quality of the balance with your personal life will be better, even though you're going to make more money, less money in this case. So just I'd like to comment maybe to hear your experience. My experience is I always commit. I committed for 8 years in University of Brazil, and now for 25 years in University of Well. So that's my single experience. And I did this, I can tell you, because I like to balance with the family. I had the opportunities to move to work in Australia, for instance, invitations to go, and I balanced. I said, no, for my family it's better here, even though I could have a big jump on my salary. Right? So I don't know, just to throw this out there. And I know that's a trend among the young people, move faster in jobs. And even my son questioned, Dad, why you don't change, don't go to university to make more money? And I have to think, well, that's what my because of you. My yeah, so it's just it's related with this balance of the.
That study was there anything about being, I don't know if that's the right word, but like more trusted by people around you because you stuck for too long or for longer than the other people, and you know you're considered loyal somehow.
By loyalty for the institutions, in fact, because always a person can be replaced in the long term. The institution will be there, you're going to pass by.
Yep.
So I think that's, or personally for me, I think it's important. I like to, I can see my history contribute to the universal welfare. I feel proud of that. But for the universal welfare, I'm a professor. When they're going to get retired, not very far from now, but and then another professor are going to replace me and if you will believe in genetic improvement, that person do a better job than I did. So for the institution is, no, it's not very relevant, but for me it is, right? It's a personal thing. And as I said, I always try to balance with my family, right? To give stability. My wife didn't like her to be changing jobs when she was happy. Yeah, just me.
An additional comment with, well, two, with regards to time management. I heard a really nice analogy. We all have too many balls in our hand. We're juggling, right? In our day-to-day life, we're juggling these balls. And one thing that's really important is to understand which of the balls are made of glass and which of the balls are made of rubber, because you will drop balls. No matter how hard you try, some things will fall. And your job is to understand which ones are you allowed to drop and which ones can you under no circumstances drop. Sandra, Claudia's wife, and Sandra's is made of probably, I don't even know, crystal glass, right? And every one of you makes a decision about which balls in your life you want to have as crystal. That's your decision. No one can tell you. Some people will tell you that and it'll be wrong, right? It'll be their decision, not yours. You decide. And you decide how many balls you can juggle and how many you want to juggle. And they will drop on their own. You will drop the balls. Be aware of that. The second sort of comment on time management is sort of tangentially related. I read a book once, I can't remember what it was called, but it made the analogy of tasks, things that you have to do being monkeys. Okay, and these monkeys, they need to be fed. A task, something that you need to do needs to be fed. So if Avalon says to me, Christine, can you have a look at my paper? Avalon is giving her monkey to me, and I have to feed and water her monkey. I have to clean up after it because it's a live thing, right? And if I think about this, and Avalon says, can you read my paper? And she asks me this on a Friday evening, right? I can say, you know, Avalon, I don't want to look after your monkey this weekend. I think you should look after your monkey this weekend. Are you giving to me your monkey? Is it fed? Have you cleaned up after it? Did you change its diaper or whatever it is that has to be done, right? Because it's then my monkey. And if I say, yes, Avalon, I'm going to take your monkey this weekend, that's my responsibility. Because I've made that decision that that's my new monkey for the weekend, and I will give it back to Avalon in a better state than she gave it to me. And monkeys can be very different, right? Monkeys for David may mean, I don't know, David, I'm sure you can give many examples.
Grandchildren.
Grandchildren, whether they're professional or private, monkeys, be careful with the monkeys.
Great analogy. You could remember that. Does that help in time management? I'm sure you're at the stage where it is a lot to juggle work-life balance, you know. And about getting burned out. Because they have fun easier. It's harder. Flavio raised something a few minutes ago that I used as an example because it caught me off guard. When I took the job in Ottawa first time, my boss asked me to write a response to the letter that came in to the minister. So that was one of the things I had to do, turned out. And so I wrote this response. I thought I'm going to do a good job. It's the first time I'm doing that. It's new. So I wrote this and give it to him. Next day, it's back on my desk. Do it over. No reason. I just do it over. It's not right. So I did it. Yep. Now it took a lot of time. Got it done. Put it back on this next day. Do it again. So I wrote the third letter. I took it into. I said, "Here it is. Have a look. Read at it. You read it." I said, "Could you tell me what was wrong the first two?" I said, "I thought I put a lot of effort into it." And he said, "There was nothing wrong with the first two. I just needed you to have a broader perspective because this is the public that the minister is writing back to. So how does this letter go?" So I guess the point here is just that openness, you know, to ideas. And when you're interviewing, you know, it is about you, but you need to know perspective around this table. I've got a board with very different members, including Michael, on my board. So, how do I engage the board and make sure they feel that they're contributing? And it's their board. I work for the board. So the employees work for me, but I'm the sole employee of the board. So how do I convince them that I'm doing a good job? Well, here's my annual appraisal and here's the stuff we're doing. And they bring ideas to me and say, have you thought about doing this or that? Are you invested? Or why are you invested? Those people have enough money. You shouldn't put putting public funds out there. So different perspectives are really quite important to how to figure out where you want to go. Not every job you're going to get, you're going to really like. You're going to say, it's not what I thought it was. It's time to move on. And that's okay too. You want to be happy. But I'm lucky. I really like what I'm doing and I like people. So it's a people person job. If you're not a people person, you don't want to be trying to raise funds. It's not going to be, it's not very good. Understand politicians. I mean, it's tricky because personally, that's something I would never want to do. And they're not the people I tend to associate with, friends, but you have to convince them, right? So they don't need to be your buddy, but you do need to get funded because this is a really good initiative. And you have to get that outside. I mean, the universities and governments are not doing anywhere near that level of funding that they used to. So you have to raise funding. You have to understand what does the industry need or what does the public need and who can you partner with, to work on these things. And not all partnerships work out. That's another tricky thing. Legal agreements are really important. IP, huge topic. Alberta government has got an IP policy. I haven't seen it yet. They haven't released it. But IP policy that affects the academics at universities. And so there's negotiations, I understand, going on now about that because they think IP is really important. So how do we generate money from this? So again, not something that most of you have studied, but yeah. So I developed some technology when I was a research scientist. I taught you stuff with selection for mice. Well, carcass composition. I did a lot of work in selection for beef cattle and carcass. Well, what you see is not what you get hanging in the hook. So I developed some ultrasound technology, and that wasn't good enough. So I actually developed image analysis technology to interpret ultrasound images, and that got commercialized. Well, there's, you read these legal agreements. That's not something I was really familiar with. That's another skill, by the way, legal, because you're going to be having contracts to sign, IP. So it's a great asset to take a course in business law or something. Very useful for you in your careers, in your academic careers, research careers. Anyway, the point is here is that you have to have different skill sets for what you want to do. So you find that job. And not too far after graduating. Yeah. Anyway, I think this is good. Anything else for anybody? Thank you. You'd be great, and I've enjoyed this very much. It's fun coming here to talk about a topic. I think it's really important, and I'm passionate about it. So, thank you.
Maybe wait.